Hi, I'm James Shillinglaw. I'm here with a familiar face to those of you who have been watching Insider Travel Report over the years, Matthew Upchurch, who is Chairman and CEO of Virtuoso, the luxury travel network. We're going to talk to Matthew about what's going on with Virtuoso and if amid the COVID-19 crisis. But I wanted to give Matthew a chance to say some words first to you.
Well, first of all, thank you, James. Good to see you, as we say. So, as always, and I appreciate this interview, but I also want to say thank you for including my videos that I've been doing on weekly for our network. I know you've been posting them. Those are actually really were meant for our network, but I hope that people are finding them useful, because this is a time for all of us to band together. I know that everybody's saying that right now, but I truly believe that the travel industry is more so than anybody else, because we are by far the most interconnected industry in the world. And I think the one thing that I just wanted to say is, just like when I spoke at Cornell a few years ago to a bunch of hospitality students, this is a time for all of us to remind ourselves that we're not in the cruise industry, we're not in the hotel industry, we're not in the travel advisor business, tour operators, DMCs. We're all in the travel and tourism and hospitality business. And hopefully, this horrendous situation has finally brought the kind of attention to governments and the press that we're not an expendable industry. The magnitude of it and the fact that all the work that, we're proud members of WTTC, as you well know, James. Right. And, the entire purpose of WTTC has been to try to get governments, the press, and frankly, the average person to fully understand the magnitude of the economic and social impact of travel and tourism, both through direct and indirect employment. At the beginning of this crisis, never in my lifetime had I actually heard the chairman of the Federal Reserve in the United States actually mention our industry by name. So, hey, we got that going for us now, right?
No, absolutely. And I appreciate it. We have been putting up your videos because I do believe people want to hear what you are saying to your members and what you're saying about the situation. It really is some crucial news, and we've been getting a lot of people viewing them. But let's get back to Virtuoso now. And in fact, the video that appeared Friday morning, this past Friday morning, where you finally decided that Virtuoso Travel Week, which is an event that really has been built up incredibly over the years to, now it's the largest event in the travel industry almost, and certainly in the trade industry worldwide. You have decided that this August, you're going to turn that into a virtual show. Is that correct?
Yeah, and we announced that yesterday, and I have to tell you, I was 26 years old when we started that. This would have been my 32nd year. Consecutive years, so you do the math. And, I appreciate you sharing the message, because if you haven't said, I won't take up a lot of the interview there, because I really carefully thought about what I wanted to say and how I felt, and I both put it in writing and did the video, because the one good thing about this whole new virtual world is I've been touting, we installed Zoom like 4 years ago. I started doing video conferencing in the 90s. I wish I would have bought Zoom stock. The reality is, the physical can never be replaced. And so thank you for saying that. The reason we did it, there's a number of reasons. Number one, as you just said, the scale, the scope, and also something that was really important to us was the inclusion. One of the things that I'm the most proud about is not just the size, because we're always dealing with how to evolve and make it more productive, and how do you become larger and smaller at the same time. But for me, the fact that we had people from 103 countries last year, another record, was one of the things. And so inclusion was a big part of it. Also, the reality is that members and partners are devastated. Let's not sugarcoat it. I mean, we're talking about reductions in force. We're talking about furloughs. We're talking about, frankly, managing your business, at a time when you're not only at zero sales, we were looking at some reports yesterday because of debit memos, commission recalls, things like that, both on all sides. You're talking about, negative 115%, not 100%. So we just felt it was not responsible, especially since the road still ahead is still not clear. We felt it was not responsible. The number one responsibility right now of our members and our partners are to their employees and to their customers. And we just felt that right now it just wasn't responsible to do that.
Yeah. Does this indicate a trend going forward? I mean, you had really ramped up your events. And in fact, we're having satellite Virtuoso travel weeks around the country and around the world. Is this something just for the short term? I mean, who knows what's going to happen with the coronavirus until we find a cure and or a vaccine. But is this a trend that where you're going to ratchet back your meetings, or at some point do you expect to expand it again?
Well, no, I mean, first of all, I will give you a complete definitive, absolutely no. Well, we never, physical events will be back. They are absolutely essential. And as I said in my message yesterday, the reality is I'm so incredibly grateful for the years and the focus that we have spent on shared experiences like Symposium and networking, and the shared experiences we've had at Virtuoso Travel Week for the last 31 years, because that investment in those relationships are really coming to bear right now, really coming to fruit. They are an incredible part of what's keeping us spiritually enthusiastic, et cetera. And they, by the way, they played a huge role in the entire process of repatriation, cancellations, refunds, postponements, all the things, heroic efforts amongst people that have known each other. So I do believe, though, that the future is going to be a combination of the best of virtual and physical. We innovated a lot of the things that are now standards in the industry. Heck, I remember helping build the appointment matching system for USTOA when I was 22 years old, which led to the birth of the appointment system in 1988.
And then you had the fax machine, which actually, I think we might have written an entire cover story on that on Travel Agent magazine.
Yeah, I don't like to talk about that much because that really ages me, of course, along with the telex and the ticket printers, right? But,
that's right.
But the reality is that whole, what we do at Virtuoso Travel, I mean, last year, 350,000 appointments in 4 days. But it will be an exciting future because we were already using data. We were already doing things at Virtuoso Travel Week from the perspective of how to segment. And really, Virtuoso Travel Week, it wasn't just the appointments. Last year, there were 853 separate different events within the event. Mm-hmm. So it's not just the appointments and the opening session, which are obviously the big things, but all of that and all of that human connection. But I'm a huge believer that, and we're finding this out, by the way. One of the other things that I think everybody is doing in this virtual world is realizing, I mean, my two boys here, the roughest moments we've had have not been over homework, have not been over those things. It's been about missing their friends.
Yeah.
It's about that human connection. I mean, it's becoming, it's very difficult.
And absolutely. And both you and I, most of our good friends are in the industry, right?
Exactly.
So what do you see as the role of a consortium of a travel marketing network during a crisis like this? And I guess the follow-up to that is, how are you helping your members, both travel agencies and suppliers, during this global pandemic?
Yeah. I've actually watched a number of your and Alan's really great interviews with other leaders, which, by the way, I just think is fantastic that leaders in this industry are giving their wisdom. I'm really, really pleased about how we're all looking and working together. We've shared resources, videos, and things with our friends at Travel Leaders and other places. I've talked to David Harris. I mean, this is a time, and I've talked to Alex. So we're all in this together, right? And it really is true. So, but I was thinking about this question, and I can go through a lot of different things because Virtuoso has members in 53 different countries. I mean, I started dealing with this issue back in early January because we have a new office in Shanghai, and literally having webinars and conference calls, at 11 o'clock p.m. my time, but with our Greater China members, Asian members, whatever. And it's been fascinating. I think that's been one of the things. But the way I wanted to answer this is that, first of all, Virtuoso was birthed as the nation's oldest co-op. When I was 26 and I met the original founding members of what was then called Allied Travel, these are the agencies that inspired what has become the totality of my adult professional life, because I was so impressed with the way that those people came together in 1949 to do things together that they could not do alone. So when I look at my role and the role of my team as an organization, it's really to be able to do a couple of things. Number one, it's to be able to build the framework to allow there to be a sharing of knowledge and wisdom, an investment in infrastructure and tools to be able to deliver value propositions, and to deliver it in a way that allows each individual member to implement those things and create a unique expression of themselves. That's one of the reasons when I love our tagline, specialists in the art of travel.
Right.
Which when you think of art, you think of a unique expression. So the number one thing that we're doing is we're doubling down on collaboration. We started right away. Obviously our team worked incredibly hard to connect our partners and our members to try to reduce the amount of confusion around policies and all kinds of operational issues. So we doubled down that. That was really the number one thing we did in all the different categories. And then we started to build collaboration teams, small groups of members that are coming together. We provided a framework. We've had Virtuoso benchmarking teams for years. All the committees, the entire organization is run on a co-creation basis. So that's what we're doing. We're also worked very hard on professional development, things like that. And that is
this is the time for that, right? Everybody has a lot of time to really work on what they need to.
Well, and quite frankly, we were a leader in this. I mean, we started this a long time ago. I remember being interviewed by the trades over the years, what was the secret to Virtuoso's, success in having helped develop new talent, develop new talent. And and I remember that my ultimate answer is I'm willing to share it all, because it really goes back to our original mission. When we became Virtuoso in 2000, we did it because we saw that, millions of baby boomers were coming into the marketplace. And we knew that travel agents were not viewed in, let's say, the best light. That's why we created the brand, to create a spotlight on true travel advising. But also we realized is that as soon as we did that, a lot of our members were telling us they didn't have enough hours in a day to handle the business they had. And that's when we realized that the single point of failure of our profession would have been to not have the number of advisors that we needed to handle the best traveled, most technologically savvy, best educated group of consumers in the history of the planet. So when you're up against DIY and all those kinds of things, you had to build, the next generation of travel advisors. And, when people ask me if you could only pick one thing that you're the most proud of that you and your organization, your members have achieved along with your partners over the last 20 years, it's by far that.
No.
And by the way, the other thing that I loved about it is how a lot of the new people that came in, whether they were career switchers or young people, also re-energized our veterans, right? And so right now we're focusing on the ability to co-creation, professional development. We've had the really beautiful situation where a lot of our very famous former keynotes, Simon Sinek, Dr. Brene Brown, who was on 60 Minutes. By the way, if you haven't watched Brene Brown's 60 Minutes interview, you have to watch it, because I'll never forget when we had her in 2010, before she became the megastar, hooking up with Oprah, now on 60 Minutes, wrote Dare to Lead, etc. People ask me, what does a PhD in social work research got to do with travel? And I remember being put on the spot and saying, we say we're in the business of selling travel, but really we're in the human connection business. And that's what it's about.
Well, I was in the audience when she spoke, and I remember thinking, yes, why is he putting her up there? But that's another story. And she did, you were right, because she did deliver them a great message. I wanted to move on to talk a little bit about how Virtuoso is reimagining itself in the wake of this crisis. Obviously, like a lot of other groups, you sadly had to decrease the number of staff you have. I think by a third. I've heard others have done by half or a quarter, reduced working hours, all that. That's kind of for the near term. But let's talk about for the future, for next year, for the next 5 years. What has this crisis done to change your strategy?
Well, first of all, as an entrepreneur, as a business person, as somebody who supports a lot of other businesses, one of the things that I'm a huge fan of is frameworks, okay? And so I happened to run Virtuoso and started running Virtuoso about 7.5 years ago around a framework that was developed by Patrick Lencioni, the famous author of the book, 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. But really, my favorite book of his is called The Advantage. And it basically is about how to build an organization around what he calls organizational health. But also he provides a framework called the playbook that asks what they call the 6 critical questions. And it starts at the very top with, what is your greater purpose? Not how you make money, not what business you're in, but like, why would other human beings really care whether you exist or not? Like, what's your greater purpose? Now, for us, it's enriching lives for human connection. But then it goes down to a series of number of critical questions. It's like your values. How will we behave? And then it's your business definition. For us, it's about how do we actually help our members, our partners, our advisors to basically be successful, and to create a preference for consumers to use them and accentuate their businesses. But then you have strategic anchors. For us, it's personal relationships. It's the fact of creating a Virtuoso brand preference. It's creating a win-win-win. So you have these critical questions, and then you go down to what's called a rallying cry. Like, what's most important right now? And then you have defining objectives. So when you go through that, I won't go through the whole thing, but if you're not operating your business on some sort of a really good framework, I think you can do better, because frameworks actually allow you to be more nimble, to have clear communication, everybody's on the same page, and things like that. And the very last part of a playbook is who does what. Mm-hmm. So I'm a big fan of innovation and continuous innovation. And one of the biggest things that can actually hurt a business is not failure, it's success. When you are very successful at something, it doesn't take, when you're failing at something, mm-hmm. It doesn't take a whole hell of a lot of motivation to change things. Right. But when you've been very successful at something and people get used to it and it's successful and it's working, trying to change becomes a little more problematic. So what we were doing is we had actually been working on the way in which we reorganized our division, actually started that work 18 months ago. Now, when the crisis was looming, I remember asking myself as a business owner and as an entrepreneur, working with other entrepreneurs, saying to myself, okay, people only have a finite amount of emotional energy. And the reality is it's not, it's infinite from the perspective that you can replenish it, mm-hmm. but you have to manage it. And I remember asking myself the question, are all the reasons why I want to make these changes, are they still going to be worth it in the midst of a crisis? And the question that I asked myself was, are any of the reasons that I wanted to make these changes Have they changed because of the crisis? And
Right.
the answer was not only have they not changed, but they're actually even more imperative, which is faster innovation and greater efficiency of a global organization. So
that's what those changes were designed.
that was what those changes are. And for us, if you look at the brief, a quick summary of Virtuoso history, one of the things I love about this organization is the original Allied Travel was not a consortia. It was not a commission-driven organization, about overrides and commissions and all that. The original organization was an operations and a FIT and special group collective operating system, right? It was a closed group of creating bespoke travel. So we have an operational roots. Then came what I would call our direct marketing and partner portfolio era. That was the 90s, right? And then came the creation of the brand. And the reason we wanted to create the brand was that a lot of our members had the very best brands in their communities. And I don't care whether that was in New York or Sao Paulo or Mexico City or London or Tokyo or wherever it is, they had that. But we wanted to create a collective brand that was able to leverage it, particularly in the era of massive consumer names like Expedia and, frankly, even our partners. We needed to build something that had that collective ability to compete in the consumer space to the benefit of our members and their collective brands. So as we're moving forward now, we've made a lot of progress. And I was going to share a story about the fact that just last weekend, these little wonderful snippets, I got an email from a Virtuoso advisor with travel experts telling me this beautiful story about how she has one of her VVVIP clients that's a woman that lives in New York. She's highly social. Of course, she's sheltered in place. And how she called her and said, I just want to tell you that I've really, and she calls out to all of her, she's been calling all of her clients, which everybody should be doing right now, literally physical calls, et cetera, like that, Zoom calls. But in that conversation, she says, by the way, I just want to tell you that I really love getting Virtuoso Life. And I get departures too, because I've got those fancy cards, et cetera. But I have to tell you that there's something about reading Virtuoso Life that makes me feel like I'm part of some sort of a really caring and creative global community. Mm-hmm. And when we launched our brand in 2000 in Vienna, which I'm so sad that we weren't able to celebrate, that was always the dream. The dream was always that the ultimate customer would be able to feel the quality of the relationships between our advisors and our partners. So all those years of all those one-on-one appointments, if you're my hotelier that I've been meeting at Virtuoso Travel Week for years, and I send you this client, and you receive them in a way that is just special, right? Because we know each other, and so we're really doubling down, because as we come out of it, as we start to come out of this, I think the most important thing that we're going to be dealing with, we're going to be dealing with all the trade issues of policies and cancellation policies and this and that. We're going to be talking about all the different changes of travel, but it's really going to be about how to connect at a deeper level and how to with a particular type of consumer.
Right. No, and that sort of goes into one of my final questions here is how will travel be different, and how, and specifically, will luxury travel be different after this crisis? Or have you developed enough systems and enough of a community that we can get back to whatever the new normal is a lot quicker?
By the way, anybody who tells you they know what travel is going to be like, it's speculation. I think we can all look at what would be some interesting potential trends. There's all kinds of things. I was on a WTTC call earlier this week with, obviously people like Chris Nazetta, Arnold Donald, a lot of the big CEOs, et cetera. We were having a discussion with His Excellency, the Minister of Tourism of Saudi Arabia, who's hosting the G20 Ministers of Tourism. And one of the things that we all talked about is the absolute necessity, because this situation, I think the number one thing that's going to hamper a recovery is we're dealing with, well, first of all, obviously it's the evolution of dealing with the health issues around this. And so the new term we're going to be hearing about, just like after 9/11, it was, security from a terrorism perspective, this is going to be called health security. Mm-hmm. And what we're trying to do as WTTC and as an industry is trying to impress upon the G20 nations and all the nations in the world to have that, the fact that we understand that every nation has to make their own sovereign decisions regarding what we will now be calling health security.
Right.
Because the issue is not just about, the issue isn't just about, the where you're going, but where you're coming from. I mean, we may be looking at a situation where, the unthinkable we've never thought of. We don't want any people from the United States for a while, right? Because it may have to do with the issues about, it's a crazy world. So, but what we need to do from a governmental perspective is, regardless of what the decisions are of each sovereign state, we need information that is reliable, that is understandable and simple, right? That is accessible and that is timely. Because the whole point is we're all dealing with consumers that have a different level of risk tolerance, just like they did before on terrorism, right? There's different profiles and things like that. So I think that health security will become as permanent an issue, because if you watch some of the TED speeches around the people, and you talk, you watch Bill Gates and you talk about some of the other people, this is not the first pandemic, and it certainly won't be the last. So I do think that what we're going to see, I think you're going to see health security perhaps being built into resort developments. Like when people develop resort infrastructures or destinations, what is the health infrastructure that will make a traveler feel good about going to that destination, rather than just relying on the existing local health infrastructure? So I could see a world where, if billions of dollars are being spent to build the new, in Bodrum, for example, in Turkey, right? You could see the people that are building those destinations actually building a health infrastructure to make sure that it is part. And by the way, that's where I've heard some of the people say, that's where I feel, and I want to join the chorus of feeling how that the cruise industry has been absolutely inappropriately and unfairly maligned.
I would agree.
And the reason they've been maligned is they are being penalized for being the only form of travel that actually can accurately and fully accurately actually measure sickness and deal with it. Yeah. So anyway, I think the world is going to be, I will say this though, I do think that there's something else I want to be very public about, and this is the first time I've really been to the trades. The world is going to get more complicated. People traveling now, it's going to be an even deeper, more personal conversation. And I think that one of the things that I want to make sure that I want to say to our partners is, I just read the story about Barry Diller and Expedia getting an additional billions of dollars of additional capital. They'll be out there, and I've got nothing against any of this, but what I'm saying is, as somebody who represents travel advisors, I understand I'm not the one investing billions of dollars in infrastructure and ships and all these kinds of things. I understand that. Therefore, I understand the concept of yield management. All I'm asking the industry at large to please not make the same mistake is, when you do yield management, making sure that you have rate parity, right? Making sure that those people that are trying to sell your product based on the inherent value of the product, the nuances, and not just on the lowest price, don't ruin our credibility with the customers. Because there's going to be a lot of customers out there that you'll get a certain percentage of them based on just lowering your prices, but you will not get a lot of them, because this is going to be a much more complicated future with regards to people feeling safe because they are connected to somebody that has some sort of a connection, and the repatriation and the heroic efforts of travel advisors vis-a-vis a lot of other distribution channels of what they were doing, the stories that we've collected about what advisors have done. And I'll leave you on this one last note. When the financial crisis of 2008 hit, financial advisors, which are similar path to our industry, financial advisors prior to the 2008 crisis had hit an all-time high of about 85% or something like that, a very good or excellent approval rating. After the crisis, that obviously dropped down to somewhere in the, I think it was in the low 40s. What was interesting was the research that the portfolio performance of the ones that still had a high rating versus the ones that did not were really not that different, because the crisis was so crazy, there was nowhere to hide. But the reason the ones that still kept their high ratings was because of how they made their clients feel. They made them feel heard. They made them feel safe. They made them feel like they're connected to something that cared about them. Yeah. So that's Salesforce. I've been saying for the last year and a half, we are not an intermediary. Travel advisors are actually an extension of an intelligent direct-to-consumer strategy. We are an extension. We are a commission-based, and in some cases, even client-paid extension of that sales force. So please, partners, treat us that way.
Well, and that just answered my last question, is how crucial travel advisors will be now and going forward. Matthew, I want to thank you for taking the time. Always great to see you. Usually we would be doing this live, and hopefully soon we will again. But it's been great talking with you and chatting with you about this. And as they say, this too shall pass, but it will be a different world and maybe a better world. We'll see what happens. Again, thank you very much for taking the time.
Thank you, James.
I'm James Shillinglaw, and this is Insider Travel Report.